Good morning, Professor and classmates. So today I'm here with my teammates Piseth and Viraksith, and we're going to be introducing you to our SSL and TLS program. So let's begin with the introduction. Oh, before that, actually, let me introduce you to our table of content. So first we'll be introducing our project, and then we'll be talking about our method of implementation, and then we'll talk about our hardware, software, and limitations, our objective and scope, our system analysis, design, and function, and with that said, we'll be concluding our presentation. So SSL stands for Secure Sockets Layer, and it is the standard technology for keeping an internet connection secure and safeguarding any sensitive data that is being sent between two systems, preventing criminals from reading and modifying any information transferred. This includes potential personal details. So the two systems could be a server and a client or a server to server. It accomplishes this by ensuring that any data sent between users and sites or between two systems remain unreadable. It scrambles data in transit using encryption methods, preventing hackers from accessing it as it travels over the connection. And now Piseth will now be talking about the objective and scope.
Thank you, Vitou. So our objective for this project is to simply create a simple SSL and TSL program for both server-side and client-side for a simple communication between the two. The scope of this project will be that this program, both server and client-side, are able to communicate with each other on a local LAN or a local network. Now, I'm going to pass back to Vitou.
Yeah, so there were some issues that we had to keep in mind. So since our SSL or TLS uses a placeholder certificate and it is not a valid certificate, this makes the system vulnerable to untrusted certificate attacks. So without proper and valid certificates and key, this program should not be used as a serious implementation of SSL or TLS. Secondly, due to time constraints, the program can only allow the client side to send messages without getting a confirmation from the server side. And therefore, if there is a large distance between the two systems, it will be very difficult to verify if the messages have been received by the server side or not. But this could easily be fixed if we had a longer timeline for the project. So next, I'll be talking about our project implementation. So first, we assessed the project plan. So we came together to discuss and came up with several possible project ideas that we could implement. And after some research and assessments with the professor as well as each other, we all agreed upon a very clear plan with a specific timeline. Second, we executed the agreed upon plan. So with a defined plan and expectation in place, we began working on the project, and we would have regular discussions with our team members about our progress while we all worked individually. So the project's timeline was then compared to the predicted schedule, and resources were also monitored to ensure that the team has everything that we needed and in order to complete the project effectively. The third, we continued to make changes as needed. We kept consistent communication while we worked on our project, and we came together when we had any issues or problems to discuss. We also made changes whenever necessary, but we always had the input and opinions of all our members before proceeding forward. The next step was that we analyzed our project data. So it is very critical to review our data on a regular basis to determine how our project is doing in relation to our initial expectations. So we examined the data and established through testing whether there was any other places that needed changes that might be advantageous to help us reach our expectations. And if so, we will return back to the previous stage to make the necessary modifications while still collecting more data to evaluate the project variables. And the fifth step, we gather feedback. And during this phase, we gather feedback from each other and as well as the user to see if there were any unforeseen problems that needed addressing. And finally, we created this project report. So when the other steps in our implementation project is complete, we will create a project report to see if our project has performed against our initial plan or not. Yeah, so let's go back to Piseth.
Thank you, Vitou. Now, our system analysis. How does our whole software work, a whole program work? Well, it's just a really simple tool that communicate and demonstrate the functionality of SSL and TSL. And if you look at the image that we have here, you can see that it first performed a handshake, as we all know, and then it exchanged hellos as well as both certificate and cipher key. So making sure that this is the right server as well as the right user to be able to access and connect to one another. Now, moving on to functionality. First, we're going to talk about the server side. Now, like I said before, upon running the server, the program will host itself on the local network with a predetermined IP and port, as you can see here. Then waiting for a predetermined amount, we have a time limit for without any connection, and to listen to the client side to connect and exchange handshake, key, and certificate. Now, once established, it'll start listening to the client, listening on this connection, looking for any message being sent to it. And once it is received that message, it'll print it on the terminal. Once the connection is lost, the program once again will wait for a predetermined amount for another connection, another client to connect to it. Next, the client sides. So the client side are much more simple. Upon running the file itself, it'll pop up a UI asking for an input. Input the server IP as well as port IP to establish and exchange information. Once connection is established, a new UI will pop up asking for a message. And once hit submit, the message will be sent to the server side. And once disconnected, the key and everything will be exited. Now, this is our flow chart as I have described before. Once start, both have to be start, both files have to be running, server and client, to be able to establish this workflow, this program flow chart. Now, this is our defined user. So as you can see, client only have access to the client side and admin only have access to admin side. But admin also have access to both source code of client and server, and those two are connected through certificate. Once a connection is established, they will have a connection between the two. So this is how our users sort of interact with one another. Now let's look at the code. So really simply, I'm going to run the server. And once it's running, I'm going to run the client side. Is the client side running? Ah, there we go. There's a pop-up that is in the background. So as you can see, it's running. It's asking for the host IP as well as the port IP. So the host IP is 27.0.0.1. This is a local IP within this network. And the port of the server is 60,000 K. And then once submit, the connection is established. And now I can send a message. Hi. And once submit, you can see on the server, you can see on the client side, there's a receive message on the server. And this is just a simple operation of our code. Now, thank you. And I'm going to pass this presentation to Viraksith. Oh,
okay. Thank.
Going to give him control. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Piseth. I will be explaining the hardware, software, as well as the limitations of our program itself. So we'll start with the view. Okay, so we'll start with the hardware itself. Technically speaking, as you've seen with our demonstration, you can use this with one computer, but the intention for this is that you're supposed to be using it with two computers in order to communicate with each other. The other thing that you need is an access point, whether it'll be through an Ethernet cable or perhaps a router. Either way, you needed one access point in order to essentially send the data over to each other as well as to perform our handshakes. And other than that, there's also some softwares that are needed. The main software that you need is mainly Python, of course, in order to actually run the entire program on the computer. However, there's another separate library that is needed in order for it to work properly, kinda. That's Python GUI, which is needed to essentially show you the prompt for entering the IP and port, as well as the messages that you would like to send on over to your other person. But there are a couple limitations due to the time constraint that we have. Right now, the code is mainly made to use with LAN only, so it's not exactly made to run on an actual server or on the internet. So we'll need to actually do some modifications in order for that to work. And well, another small limitation is that you need a specific library, specifically Python GUI, but that's simple enough to install if you know what you're doing. So in conclusion, SSL is the easiest and most cost-effective standard for websites to implement if they want to essentially protect their user data. We are constantly adapting and changing into our more technical world. So our personal information, such as our credit card, our bank details, our names, addresses, our security number, becomes more at a risk of being stolen, which is why SSL is an important part of it. That's pretty much it for our presentation. If you have any questions, leave it in the discussions below. And that's all. Thank you.